So hey there folks, good to see you. Look, I wasn't going to make a video. That wasn't going to be my point. I was just going to find a video online and link it and be done with it. But the fact is this is something that really matters to me, so I'm making a video to tell you all about it. So this is a basic introduction to a guy named Stephen Sondheim. You've heard me talk about him before. If you know anything about musical theater, you have heard his name, although you may not know his musicals as well. And so the question is, okay, well, why is he so important? Why is Finley going on about this? Sondheim is important because he has lived a very long time. He's still alive. He's in his 80s. And he's been writing musical theater from a very young age. So he has influenced musical theater basically through all the important periods and has left his mark on it. And along the way has made some incredibly important pieces of music. So he is a bridge of different periods of musical theater. He trained under Oscar Hammerstein of Rodgers and Hammerstein. Now, Rodgers and Hammerstein, if you know their shows, Carousel, Cinderella, Sound of Music, they're all like really old-fashioned shows. But that's to us. Back then, they were revolutionary. They were the first shows where the songs were about the character. It was the character singing, not just some random song that was stuck into the show that the composer had already written. This idea of the character singing about stuff that mattered to the character and singing in character, that the songs were basically monologues or sometimes dialogue that was sung. Rodgers and Hammerstein invented that. So they seem old-fashioned to us, but they were really important. And Sondheim trained under Oscar Hammerstein as a teenager. So he starts right there. Then he starts as a lyricist, writing the lyrics. And he writes the lyrics for a show called West Side Story. West Side Story, this is 1957, is the first sort of new musical, you might think. We're going from that golden age of musicals like The Music Man, where there's always a happy ending, and it's like Oliver, exclamation mark, and the musicals are always happy, and these big dance numbers. West Side Story is the first show to say, oh, no, wait a minute. The theater can tell more stories than that, and hey, musicals can tell more stories than that as well. And so Sondheim wrote the lyrics to that, and a guy named Leonard Bernstein wrote the music for that. That was followed up by a show called Gypsy, where again, it was dealing with much more mature themes. It was a very sort of heavy show, and he wrote the lyrics to that. So those two, he just wrote the lyrics. Then he wrote, and you don't need to know these sort of details, just sort of know the way this art goes, a show called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. That was important because he wrote the music and the lyrics. And all of these are coming out of what we think of as the golden age of musicals, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, the musicals where everybody's happy all the time. And these begin to be shows that are a little bit deeper than that. I'm looking up something real quick here. That start to be more significant, important than just an evening in the theater, some fun with some music and some songs. These are followed then by some shows in the 70s that really push that in a new direction. Anyone Can Whistle, actually that was in the 60s. It only ran for 9 performances. It was a huge flop. Some great numbers in it though. I'd love to do that show. But in the 70s, a show called Company, a show called Follies, and a show called Little Night Music, and a show called Pacific Overtures, all of which really sort of pushed theater in a new direction and said, you can tell really serious, meaningful stories, and you can tell them in a musical. It doesn't all have to be over-the-top romances. It doesn't all have to be, tap dance and romantic comedy. You can tell serious stories, and you can tell them in a musical. And no one had ever done that before. And one of the musicals you probably know of his is the last musical of that period, which is Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, where he wanted to push it as far as it possibly could go in like, how serious a story can we tell? Well, we can tell a story about obsession and murder and cannibalism, and we can even tell it as a comedy and have some great music in it. You may know that one. There was a okay film version of it done, but it's one of his more famous musicals for that reason. And then he went on from there to do shows that were even sort of more important, if not necessarily more famous. They include three musicals that mean a lot to me. One is called Sunday in the Park with George. That's my favorite musical. One is called Into the Woods. They did a very bad film version of that. If you saw the film version of it and you liked it, great. The real thing is even better. If you saw the film version, it's like, what is this about? Ignore the film version. Ignore it. Ignore it. I will give you a recording of the Broadway version with Bernadette Peters and you will understand. It'll be okay. It'll be fine. And then he also did a show called Assassins, which, again, dealing with really serious themes. It deals with the people who've tried to kill the President of the United States. And you can see, by the way, in Assassins, the roots of the type of musical that a young man named Lin-Manuel Miranda, who studied with Sondheim, would turn into a show called Hamilton. So you see the chain, right? You see the bridge. Rodgers and Hammerstein teaches Sondheim. Sondheim teaches many different people, including a guy named Jonathan Larson, who wrote Rent, and a guy named Lin-Manuel Miranda, who you all know. So what is his music like? You may not know a lot of his songs individually because the songs really fit into the shows. You can't just take them out. Like if you look at old-fashioned musicals like Rodgers and Hammerstein, the characters are singing about stuff, but the songs work even without that character. So you can take Oh, What a Beautiful Morning out of Oklahoma and just sing it. You can't do that so easily with Sondheim shows because the story and the character and the music are all so locked together that you can't just take them out. So people often don't know his music just on its own. His music tends to be a little bit challenging because he's trying to create a sense of the character in the music. And so you might have simple, easy characters who sing simple, easy songs, like Giants in the Sky from Into the Woods. There are giants in the sky. It's very easy to sing. There's nothing weird about it because he's a simple, sort of wide-eyed character. This is Jack of Jack and the Beanstalk. But then he writes these characters that are really like tormented and difficult, like Sweeney Todd, who of course is a murderer. He's bent on revenge. And so his music is very sort of thorny and difficult to sing. I think that's wonderful because it helps tell the story better, but it means that his music maybe isn't as immediately listenable as Rodgers and Hammerstein, who are really interested in just writing a pretty tune. His lyrics, similarly, are always motivated by character. He's a very, very smart man, so if he writes a smart character, that character's lyrics are super, super smart, and there's all kinds of internal rhymes. I'm going to link for you a song called Not Getting Married Today, which shows you just sort of the complexity of the rhymes that he's capable of doing, and which, again, a guy named Lin-Manuel Miranda has pointed to as an inspiration for some of the theatrical rap that you see in Hamilton. But the other thing to keep in mind about him, this is the last thing I'll say, thank you for watching this far, is that his plays are musicals for grown-ups, if you want to think about it that way. They are musicals about serious things and about what is probably the most universal theme of growing up, and that is loss and desire. That's why I put him with this particular unit. His characters all are longing for something and trying to get it, and then often they get it only to realize that it wasn't what they wanted, or that in getting it, it has destroyed some part of them. The assassins of the musical Assassins, many of them do kill the president, and they discover that's not a good thing at all. It actually destroys them. The play Into the Woods is all about, the first act is the fairy tales as you know them, and the second act, the amazing second act, is what happens after Happily Ever After, when you realize that they got exactly what they wanted. They got the prince, they killed the giant. Now there are consequences to that. In Sunday in the Park with George, it's about the artist Georges Seurat and the painting of Sunday on the Island of Le Grand Jatte. You may know that painting. It's my favorite painting. The second act then deals with, okay, what if you are a famous artist and you've made great work? What does that mean? That's what Sondheim is interested in, not just the easy thing, not just the sort of thing that you would usually get in a musical, right? Not just the happy love story, not the Rodgers and Hammerstein sort of stuff, but rather the consequence, what happens when you get what you want, that constant tension between desiring something and then getting it, and what does that mean? And then he builds that tension, that difficulty, into the music itself. That's why he's so amazing. So listen to the clips I'll link here, and thank you.